So this week's Torah portion is fascinating, Vayakhel, and is very interesting how throughout the Exodus from Egypt, we very much feel the feminine energy, the feminine power, the feminine neshama, the feminine soul. And in this Torah portion, once again, the women shine. Just to bring everybody up to speed, if you recall, when the Jewish women left Mitzrayim, they received the Torah. Who were the first ones that God told Moshe to teach? Kais Amar lebeis Yaakov v'sagid lebnei Yisrael. First, teach the women the Torah and impart the Torah to the women, and then impart it to the men. So we see that the women lead the way, the women lead the path, and God always points out the fact that the women are a very powerful energy in the Jewish people, amongst the people of Israel. And today we're going to see it again. But before we go into that, we know that in the last Torah portions, Truma Tetzava, God commands the Jewish people to build what? Who remembers? What are they building?
Tabernacle.
The tabernacle, which is the mini Mishkan, the mini Beit HaMikdash that traveled with them in the desert. And eventually, when they came to the land of Israel, we built the first temple, the first Beit HaMikdash, and the second Beit HaMikdash. And it's very detail-oriented. There's pegs, there's hooks, there's tapestries, there's gold, there's silver. It's extremely detail-oriented. And in the Torah portion of Truma Tetzava, there are passages upon passages telling the Jewish people how to build the Mishkan and the tabernacle. And we know that the Torah never has an extra word, doesn't have an extra sentence, doesn't have to have an extra comma. It's all thought out. Every letter, every word has a reason, a meaning, an understanding. So now we come to Parshas Vayakhel, and once again, there's a repetition of the instructions of how to build every vessel, every part of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, which is so strange. We know that the 5 books of the Torah are shorter than what I always say, Herman Wouk Winds of War or Harry Potter. So why would God now rewrite all the details? How's the hooks and the pegs and the curtains and the rods and the wood and the tapestries and the thread count and the menorah and the gold and the silver and the copper? You know, if a speaker repeats themselves too much, what does everyone in the audience say? You made your point, move on. Stop repeating yourself. We heard what you said. Why are you telling us again? So we ask, why does God repeat? It's not one sentence, 2 sentences. It's sentences upon sentences. Two whole Torah portions, again reiterating what we read and studied in the previous Torah portions. So does anybody have an insight? What is this repetition all about? So for this, we have to go into Hasidus, Jewish mysticism, which is, of course, Kabbalah, that really it's talking about 2 different tabernacles. There's one tabernacle in the previous Torah portion of Truma Tetzava that is the celestial tabernacle, the supernal tabernacle, the spiritual tabernacle, up in the celestial heavens, metaphorically speaking. And the tabernacle that we're talking about building now is the tabernacle that's in the physical world, built by the people of Israel, with the chief architect Bezalel. So there's 2 tabernacles. There's the tabernacle that's up in the heavens, again, metaphorically speaking, and then there is the tabernacle that's down on earth, the one that you and I, if we were in the desert, building with the Jewish people, with Bezalel as the architect. 2 of them. And if you look also, the same thing happened with the luchot, with the tablets, remember? The first one, the tablets came down from heaven. God engraved the 10 commandments with fire. And then the second one, Moshe sat and chiseled it out. Moshe sat with his hammer and his chisel and chiseled out the 10 commandments. Again, we have two different luchos. The ones that God created and then the ones that Moshe created. So we see it here. So what's the difference? And the answer lies in a very interesting sentence where God does not say anywhere in the Torah, and I now dwelled in my tabernacle in the heavens. But when it comes to the tabernacle built down below, it says, God says, and I came and I dwelled and I showed my presence in the tabernacle on this earth. Which means to tell us that which is the superior, in a sense, tabernacle? Which one? Based on this passage?
The one he dwells in on earth.
Exactly. Because God desired the tabernacle down on earth. Why? Because the tabernacle down on earth, the same thing like the luchot that Moshe carved out, was built by man, was built by the Jewish people. And that to God, the efforts, our efforts, sometimes even imperfect at times, is greater to God than God making his own tabernacle. You know, you bake a cake, you make a dinner for your family, and it's perfect. You're an excellent chef, you're an excellent baker. But what happens when your little son or your little daughter makes you a little lopsided cake? And it's a little raw, and it's a little bit this, and it's the most precious thing. Why? Doesn't your cake look better and taste better? Of course.
Nope.
No, not in your house, huh?
No, the kids do it.
I have to say, in my house, my kids are better bakers. Okay, but let's make believe they're not. You're not. It is the efforts of the person, of the child, that is the greatest joy. It's not so much that the cupcake is perfect, the stew is excellent, superbly spiced. It's the effort of your child that they made and they baked, they cooked. So when God sees the effort that we put in into this universe, into the tabernacle, and at times we make mistakes, and at times it's not exactly the way God meant it to be. That God will dwell there because it was created by us for God. It's the greatest gift we can do. Say, God, I made you a tabernacle. Listen, it's not as gorgeous as the one upstairs in heaven, but we tried our best. And we're also not only talking about a tabernacle that's the actual building, because remember we discussed Vasali Mikdash, V'shachanti b'saycha, make me a tabernacle and I will dwell within them. Because the them means each and every one of us. That when there is no physical building anymore, like destruction of the second temple, we don't have a temple anymore, we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. Where does God dwell? Where is there a tabernacle? Within you, within me, within every person that allows God into their lives, into their structure, into their mini tabernacle. So this is what God is telling us. There's a celestial tabernacle. It's whole, it's perfect, it can never be destroyed. But then there's the physical tabernacle down on earth that I reside in. And that's the one I come down to because it was made by you. And that to me is more precious than my perfect mansion, my perfect tabernacle up in the heavens. Now let's take this even one step deeper in analysis. You have the life that you envisioned for yourself. You have your dreams that you dreamt, your perfect home, your perfect job, your perfect life, your perfect children, your perfect everything, your perfect world. That's the celestial tabernacle. And then you have the life you're given or the life that comes away, your challenges, your battles, the crisis, the broken parts that come your way. Real life. But the world, the real life, the real world is really the greatest achievement. Because we all have dreams. And those dreams are very beautiful, and it's a utopia to have those dreams. But what is the reality? The reality is that life comes with the challenges, the battles, the crisis, the unexpected. You thought you were going flying to the island of who knows where, and you ended up in the desert. So sometimes we think we're going one way, and we end up somewhere else, in a much more challenging, difficult place. And that's where our tabernacle is. That's where God resides. That's where we are. The reality, what happens, and the dream. So the tabernacle up in heavens is what we dream our lives to be, perfection. We all want perfection. But the tabernacle down on earth, where God actually resides, is in those moments of pain, sorrow, crisis, battle, challenges. That's where you really feel the presence of God. Remember Richard Nixon? Remember the famous Richard Nixon? He said something very funny. He says, you know why Americans are infatuated with Kennedy? And why they hate me? He said, because everybody wants to look like Kennedy. Everybody wants to look like Kennedy. But at the end of the day, they all look like me, he said. That's why they hate me and they love Kennedy. So it's how we want to look, how we envision ourselves, and what we end up being, in a sense. So these are the two sanctuaries. You know, there's a story I read from the Holocaust, a very touching story. I think it ties in, I'll share it. There was a young Hasidic couple. They were engaged to get married in Krakow. A young boy, young girl, you know, marriageable age. And right before they're supposed to get married, they both get taken to Auschwitz, to the concentration camps. And they know they will never see each other again. It's impossible to survive this horror. But years go by, and the Russians free the camps. And as they're both being freed, they notice, because the men and women were kept separate, the grooms brought the bride in the mass of people. Could you imagine the how do you call it, when you're reunited? Could you imagine what went on here? They couldn't believe it. And life goes on, and they try to go back to where they were, and they take a stroll, and they end up in a vacant house, and there's a mirror there. And the bride, the girl, looks at herself in the mirror. She lost most of her teeth. Her hair there's no hair barely. She's skin and bones. There's scars all over her face and body. And she begins to cry, and she turns around at her chassan, at her groom, and she says to him, how could you love someone who looks like me? He says, how could you love someone who looks like me? I look like the angel of death. And he looks at his bride and he says, you were never more beautiful to me than right this moment. He tells her. So this is the two tabernacles. They're engaged, they're in love, they're living a beautiful life in Krakow. Then comes the Holocaust. Could you imagine, for a couple supposed to get married, a young couple? And then comes the second tabernacle, the reality. And that's when you were never more beautiful to me, because that is what it means. We have the dream of what our lives will be, and hopefully those dreams come true. And that 99% of our lives should be the dream. And then you have the reality that sets in. And that's the most beautiful tabernacle, because it is the world that God made. Why did God make a world? Why? What does he need us for? We deny God. We sometimes, God forbid, we curse God. We don't listen to God. Why did God need us? Because the Kabbalah says, God wanted to dwell among us. Yes, the people that say, God, I don't like you, I hate you, God this, God that, we blame you for everything. God still wants us and loves us and made us, so understands that our tabernacles are not going to be perfect. At times they'll be broken, but you are most beautiful to me right now. This is the message of the two sanctuaries that we talk about in the Torah. Does anybody want to add anything or share anything? I see the tabernacles in your homes are really beautiful. So now comes a very, very interesting part of the Torah portion. So Moshe says to the Jewish people, time for donations. We need silver, we need gold, we need copper, we need threads, we need flax, we need linen, we need money. We have to build this Mishkan. We have to build this tabernacle. And there were so many donations brought by the Jews that Moshe actually had to announce that everyone should stop. There's too much money in the coffers. My husband always makes a joke by this Torah portion. Halavai, our shul should be able to tell everybody, stop giving donations. We're set. It always gets a laugh because which organization doesn't ask for tzedakah every minute? I always say something that it's very interesting. The Lubavitcher Rebbe gave out dollars every Sunday. Remember, I'm sure any of you maybe heard about it. People came on Sunday afternoons, and for hours the Rebbe would give out brand new dollar bills to anyone who came in. It was lines and lines. And I always told people, rabbis are notorious for asking for money. Rabbi, what do you want? I need money. The roof is leaking. We have to pay salaries. We have to pay the Hebrew school teachers. How many rabbis give out dollars? How many rabbis? The Rebbe gave out dollars. You know why? To educate people about how to give. The Rebbe would give you the dollar. You would take it, keep it, because it's special. And you would take another dollar and give it into tzedakah. So anyway, Moshe said, enough already. We have enough geld. We have enough gold. Stop. Stop bringing tzedakah to the tabernacle. We have enough. A beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story in the Torah portion. So I want to read to you what happened here. Very interesting. Okay, ready? Vayevayu ha'anashim al hanashim. The men came along with the women, which means to say the women went first. Everyone who was generous of heart brought, what did the women bring? Their nose rings, their finger rings, their armbands, and and earrings, all sorts of gold ornaments. And every man raised up an offering of gold to Hashem. So the Torah asks two questions here. The commentaries jump in. First of all, why doesn't it say what the men brought? It's so specific that the women brought earrings, nose rings. Anybody here wear a nose ring? Finger rings and armbands. But it doesn't say what the men brought. And yeah, go ahead, Jane.
I just have a question. Where did they get these? Weren't they slaves?
Oh, very good question. So, by the way, the Jews left Egypt with tremendous wealth. Two ways. One, during the plague of dark. Good morning, Kim. Good morning. During the plague of darkness, God told Moshe to tell the Jewish people they were owed thousands and thousands of dollars for working for free. Go to the houses of the Egyptians, because remember, for them it wasn't dark, and go collect your salaries. So they took gold and silver and copper and jewelry from their slave masters. 2, when the splitting of the Red Sea, remember? When the
Oh,
Jews
yeah.
crossed to the other side, what happened to the Egyptians?
Oh, right. And they all got
Right, Diane
stuck
said it
there.
nicely. They all were drowned, and God made a miracle that all the valuables that they had in their pockets and in their wallets were swept ashore. So you have a few thousand uh, soldiers and generals and gold chariots coming to kill the Jews, to get the Jews back to Egypt. And all the valuables that these thousands of soldiers had emptied out from their pockets like magic and ended up on the shores, and the Jews collected all the valuables. So even if one guy was only carrying 50 gold coins in his wallet because he wasn't going shopping that day, 50 by thousands of soldiers, you make a lot of geld there. So it was a lot of money that they accumulated from the Egyptians. So that's how they had it. Also, interestingly enough, right? When didn't the women give their jewelry? When did the women say, we're not giving our jewelry? We don't care what you want to do?
For the
Golden
golden calf.
calf.
For the
Exactly.
golden calf.
By the sin of the golden calf, notice what happens. The men say to their wives and daughters and sisters, shell out your jewelry. We need to make a golden calf. We need to melt down your gold, and we need to make a golden calf. What did the women say?
Oh,
Absolutely not. I'm not giving you jewelry. So you might think now, oh, it's not because of the golden calf. Which woman wants to give up her jewelry? But look here. Look how they don't hesitate. Not only they don't hesitate, the Torah says they came first. So when it comes for something holy, who goes first? The women. They run to give their earrings, their armbands, their nose rings. No one said, you know what? This is so sentimental to me. This is so important to me. They immediately brought all their jewelry to be melted down to be used for the Mishkan. So you cannot say they were a stingy group. Look how they didn't want to give for the golden calf. They didn't give for the golden calf because it was idolatry. But for the tabernacle, God said to bring, we bring. So now we have to build, because you're going to see more and more how the feminine energy comes to play. Excuse me for 1 second. Some machinery went on. I just need to shut it. Oh, I'm sorry. So now, in I want to make sure I give you the right date. In March 1934, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the Rebbe's father-in-law, went to Riga, Latvia. He was in Riga, Latvia, and he went there and he said to the Jewish community, I would like to address all the women. So there was a gathering for women with the Rebbe. Now, in 1934, there was no women's lib, there was no feminist movements, there was no voters' rights. Look at the mindset of the Rebbe in 1934. How the Lubavitcher Rebbe, already in the 1930s, addressed only the women. And in that address to the women, he discussed this very story, that the women came and gave these items. What happened to necklaces? Didn't any of them own necklaces? Didn't any of them own ankle bracelets? Right? Or bracelets? How come it only specifies earrings, nose rings, finger rings, which is rings, and armbands? What about the other jewelry women have? How come if the Torah is telling you all the jewelry they brought, Didn't they bring necklaces? Didn't they bring bracelets? And so on? Maybe even headbands. Women wore those tiaras. So the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe says there's a very distinct lesson and insight into these jewelry pieces. And it is the lesson of education, educating our children, educating our students, educating ourselves, educating our spouses, and educating the world. These 4 pieces of jewelry give us an approach to life, a lifelong approach. In education, there was a little boy who used to go hang out at the barber shop every day. And the barber was a nice guy. And every day he would say to the little boy, "Here, which one do you want?" And he would show him 2 palms. On one was a dollar bill and one was 50 cents. And the little boy every day took the 50 cents. And one day the barber's more wealthy clients came into the shop and the little boy was there. And the barber says to the clients, "Look at this kid. I want to show you something." And he shows them. He says to the little boy, "Ready? Which one do you want? The 50 cents or the dollar bill?" And the little boy, as usual, takes the 50 cents. He says to his friends, "You see, the kid's not too smart. He doesn't realize a dollar is worth much more than 50 cents. One of the clients who was there in the barbershop decides he's going to follow the little boy. He follows him out. He sees him go across the street and buy an ice cream. He says to him, "Little boy, I want to ask you something. Don't you know that the dollar is worth more than the 50 cents? Why do you always take the 50 cents? He says, "Yep, I know the dollar is worth more than 50 cents. But once I take the dollar, the game will be over." He says to him.
My father used to tell me that story.
Oh, good. Yeah, right? What did your father say? What was his punchline?
It was really pennies or a dollar or something, but the same line, same result. He was smart because he knew it would stop if he got.
Yeah, it's like my daughter used to play mahjong with my husband's grandmother, or Rummy Cub, one of those games. And she was brilliant, my daughter. She could win anybody at anything. And I would say, "Sorry, how come you didn't win?" She says, "Mommy, I have to let Bubby win." Kids are not like, they're intuitive, they're smart. Sometimes they do something for you, even though they don't. So she said that. I was very proud of her. It's a good point. So what do the Rebbe says to the women of Riga? What do these 4 items represent? And they represent our approach again to education and how we deal with people. Any of you read the book The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey? Fantastic book. And then there's a book he came out later, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teenagers. So I bought the book for my children, and by breakfast I would read them these chapters. And my kids finally said to me one day, "Ma, it seems you need the book more than us. We already know everything in this book." So one of the first lessons is earrings. Earrings symbolizes the ability to listen. In order for us to ever tell anybody anything or respond, you have to first listen. You have to listen. What is your child, telling you? What is your spouse telling you? What is your friend telling you? What is your student telling you? Listen to what they're saying. If you don't listen and they don't feel they're heard, no response that you will give will ever be good. You have to learn to listen. You have to use your ears and listen to what your child is saying. Because, many times it's not even that they want a response, they want to be heard. "Mommy, you didn't hear a word I said." Because, I know when my kids call me, I right away am a solution. I am a problem solver. Finally, my daughter says, "Ma, I didn't ask you for solutions. All I want to be, I want to kvetch to somebody. I want to just share my problem with you. I don't want a solution. I want to just be able for you to listen to what I have to say." So in this book, Stephen Covey, he makes a very good point. What do parents always say? I don't understand. My child doesn't listen to what I have to say. My child doesn't hear me. She doesn't listen, or he doesn't listen to what I have to say. And he says, but what do you mean your child is not listening to what you have to say? First, you have to listen to your child before you can say they don't listen to what I have to say. My child doesn't hear me. Don't you have to hear them? So you have to listen and hear what is your child, your spouse, your friend, your student saying to you. Listening, number one lesson in education. You must listen. Because if, again, your child knows they are heard, they will be more likely to listen to you because you listen to them. And they learn how to listen from you, by the way, from us. They learn how to be good listeners from us. So that's the first thing the Rebbe said to the women. The second thing the Rebbe said is they brought nose rings. What's a nose ring? Anybody want to share? A nose symbolizes a sense of sniffing, a sense of smell. You have to be able to sense what a person needs, what a child needs, a spouse, a friend, again, any relationship, student. It's not what they say sometimes. It's what you sense. Sometimes someone, is everything okay? Everything is okay. You know everything is not okay. You sense it's not okay. You don't even have to ask sometimes. You see in the body language, you see in the motions. You know, the child comes in and throws a knapsack across the floor. Do you really have to ask them, did you have a bad day? You didn't realize? And later they say, Mom, I missed the basket. And oh, the boys made fun of me because I didn't get the last point for the basketball game. So sometimes it's in the body language. And if you sense it and you sniff it, sometimes it's better not to say anything. Let the person be. Sometimes you have to let a person be because you sense they need space. You sense they need alone time. So the Rebbe said the second lesson in education is the sense of smell. Sniff it out. Be sensitive to what you're feeling, what the person is feeling. What the person is feeling. And the next thing is something that people don't have a hard time. And that's the ring, the finger ring, the ring. The Rebbe says, what's the means of finger ring? Pointing your child, your student in the right direction. You see them on a path of collision. You as a parent, you as a mother, you as a woman, you have an obligation to point them in the right direction. Oh, all children fail, all children fall. That's true. But we have an obligation to point in the right direction. Say, you know what? I hear what you said, but this is the right thing to do. This is how you do it. Go point in the right direction. Parents nowadays, you know, I hear it all the time. They're afraid to say anything. They're afraid. They want to be their child's friend. Your child doesn't need another friend. Trust me, your child needs a parent. Your child wants direction. Children thrive on discipline and direction. People at times need to be told, this is how we should do it. Let's do it this way. Like I always say, you know, I have adult children. Many of you can relate to this. They don't like to be told what to do, but I always say, I'm your mother. If I see something is not the right thing, the right way, I will point you in the right direction. You may not want to listen. You may not want to do what I say, but I have an obligation to point you in the right direction. And that's what the finger ring symbolizes. Pointing your student, your friend, your spouse, your child, yourself, also educating yourself in the right direction. And the last thing the Rebbe spoke about from the jewelry is the armband. What does that symbolize? Anybody have an insight? It's
I don't know, security, holding on. I don't know.
yeah, it's strength, conviction, being assertive, discipline, even being proactive. You know, even though life, you have to be compassionate and loving and giving, but times you must have discipline in the home and in life. There has to be discipline. Not everything goes, honey, I'm sorry. There's consequences to what you did, and you have to show strength, not weakness. You said to your child, listen, I'm going to take away your iPhone if you do this, this, and this. They did it, you take away the iPhone. It hurts you, you don't want to, but you have to show strength and discipline because people have to know you mean business. And that not there's accountability, not everything goes. You know, and I don't want to be extreme, but all the stories with the guns, with the shootings, and the mother bought the child a gun. What? You see they're doing inappropriate on the computer, shut down the internet, disconnect the internet. Parents, you know, I all the time, I speak for myself too, we're scared at times to be too radical, too disciplinary. But if you couple it with compassion and love, then when you show discipline, it's respected. You know, I once told my daughter something. She says, "Ma, you never tell us anything." I said, "That's how you know that when I do tell you, you know I mean business. Because I never say anything about this issue. If I do say not," she says, "you know, I never looked at it that way. I never said anything I said because it wasn't drastic, but now it is. I have to tell you, this does not wash well. This is not going to happen." So discipline works when there's also compassion in life. Not that every time you see your child, your spouse, your friend, oh, it's just everything you criticize, and then they never have any. Then when do they take you seriously? When, oh, it's always criticism. But when they brought the 4 types of jewelry, it says nidiv leiv. They gave it with a generous heart, which means with discipline, with pointing your children in the right direction, there must be the kind, generous heart. You cannot discipline with hate. You cannot discipline with anger. You cannot discipline with viciousness or revenge. You could only discipline when it's in a good place. So I always say, leave the discipline for when you have your wits about you. You're about to lose your mind about something that happened. Don't do it that. Don't discipline that second. Go step out, put yourself in a good place, and discipline from a place of compassion and a good place. And then it works better. Doesn't always work, but it works much better than if that moment you lose your temper and you throw the pot across the floor and you pull the plug out of the outlet. It works much better where you're in control, not the situation controls you. A father came to the Baal Shem Tov. He had a big problem. His son was undisciplined. He wasn't following not only forget about Torah and mitzvahs, the kid just was unruly, uncontrollable. So he said, Baal Shem Tov, Rebbe, what should I do? My son is uncontrollable. The Baal Shem Tov said to him, love him more. Give him even more love, more compassion, more kindness. Love him more. Because with all the discipline and the structure, the first line of defense has to be love, compassion, and kindness to your children, your spouse, your students know it's coming from a place of love. Baal Shem Tov said, love him more. Love him more. So this answers, of course, the question, why these 4 pieces of jewelry? Because it's showing 4 foundations of education. And once again, to re-emphasize how the women came first with their jewelry. Another first of the women. And now we come to something that I find is spectacular. And it is a beautiful, beautiful insight into the Torah portion along the lines of the gifts of the women. So, they had to build different vessels, and the sink in the tabernacle was made out of what? Anybody remember what item was it made out of?
Ceramic?
Good, not quite. Anybody else? That's a good guess. It could have been. Jayan, you're an artist, so of course everything is made of ceramic.
Ceramics. It was really meant to be a joke, but okay.
No, it's cute. Very good. Yes.
Gold.
Gold, that's what I would guess.
Okay, what else could have been made out of? Mirror. Think of what a mirror is made out of in the olden days.
Oh, mica.
Copper.
Oh,
Copper. So this is a fantastic part of the story. Listen what happens. Vayakhel hakir nechoshes, and he made the sink of copper and its pedestal of copper. Where did they get copper? Listen to this fantastic story. B'maros hatzivois asher tzava pesach ayel mayed. They made it with the mirrors of the women who congregated at the entrance of the tabernacle, the Mishkan. Now Rashi says a fascinating thing, that when the women brought their copper mirrors to be melted down for the sink, Moshe says to them, I draw the line. I'm not accepting your mirrors. Go home with them. Why? Because he says, what's a mirror? A mirror is used for vanity. To put on your lipstick, to look in the mirror and say, oh, I'm so stunning. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most beautiful one of all? Snow Beauty, what's the name of it? Beauty.
Snow White?
Snow
No.
White, Snow White, right? Remember
Right?
the witch?
No,
They said
Snow
there's one
White.
more beautiful than you. She puts a spell on Snow White. So God intervenes. I want to read the Rashi because it's so fascinating. God says to Moshe, excuse me. God says, from the women of the Rashi says, the women owned mirrors, which they would look in when they adorn themselves. But Moshe rejected them because they were made for vanity. Okay? So what does God say to him? Accept them, for these are more precious to me than anything. So God is now telling Moshe, excuse me, you need to be corrected here. I want you to accept these mirrors because they're more precious to me than anything. And God explains why are they more precious. Now, if you think the Torah is not risque, listen carefully. Because through them, the women set up many families. The children they gave birth to in Egypt. When their husbands, this is Rashi, when their husbands were weary from back-breaking labor, the women would go out and bring them food and drink and give them to eat. They would take the mirrors and see themselves with the husband in the mirror, and she would seduce him with words saying, I am so beautiful. And their husbands were aroused with desire, and they would have intimacy under the apple tree. Listen to this. Don't sing under the apple tree with anyone else but me. Where do you think they got that song from here? Okay. And this is how they gave birth to hundreds of children. This is the meaning that the mirrors set up the legions, the children, and this is what the washstand should know made from. Okay. No, this is Rashi. It's not even my words. So Rashi's saying something spectacular. Moshe says, excuse me, no mirrors. Mirrors is vanity. Why would I make a vessel in the tabernacle out of something that's vain, a mirror? God says, oh, no, 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 no. These mirrors are so precious, you don't understand. When Pharaoh decreed that all the baby boys be thrown into the Nile River and drowned, and all the girls be given up for adoption into Egyptian families so they should not be raised as Jewish girls, what did the women do? They could have said, listen, let's practice birth control. We cannot give birth to children in this world. Their husbands said, listen, we got to take a break. The women beautified themselves. They brought out their food for the husbands, and they were intimate, and they brought forth the children with whom they left the land of Egypt. So the mirrors is a symbol of the faith of the women. How easy would it have been for the women to say to the husband, you're right, honey. It's COVID-19. There's a plague. Pharaoh's throwing all the children into the river. There's World War III coming. We're not having kids anymore. What do we need it for? Let's wait till we're in a better place. We have more money. We have a bigger house. We could afford college tuition. Why do we want to bring another kid into the world now during this crisis? The women went and said, God said he's taking us out of Egypt. We're going to have those children. We're going to bring them with us out of Egypt. So the mirror symbolizes such a deep faith of the women that in the biggest of crises, they did what they had to do to bring the children into the world. Think about it. I don't know if I could do that. I really don't. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if, It's amazing the faith of these women. It's mind-boggling how powerful they were. So again, if you ever question the Torah's view on women, right here, the second book of the Torah, all about how the women, the feminine energy, the faith that the women had, led the way for their spouses, for their men, for their sons. They were inspiration to the entire people of Israel. But Kabbalah explains something even more powerful here. What was the debate between Moshe and God? Moshe says a mirror is a sign of vanity. I'm not using it in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle. And God is saying something else totally. God's saying that women have the power to imbue the most materialist, what we look at materialism, with holiness. The mirror isn't just a mirror. The mirror, them beautifying themselves, was because they knew there was a higher calling, a greater cause. And when the women had intimacy with their spouses, it's a holy act. It's a big mitzvah. The act of a husband and wife who are married according to Jewish law, intimacy is the greatest mitzvah in the Torah. Why? I mean, how do you know? Because that's how you conceive a child. It's not a mitzvah because you're able to conceive a child. You're able to conceive a child because it's a mitzvah. Because it's so holy, people say, oh, because you can have children, that's why it's holy. No, it's holy in itself. Because it's so holy, you can have children during that act, conceive a child during that act. Now, how does intimacy become holy? So it's a very interesting story. I'm digging a little deeper into the story. There was a great Rebbe called the Kotzker Rebbe. Very busy Rebbe, had thousands of disciples. And he's sitting with one of his children, chatting. And one of his outspoken disciples says, Rebbe, do you even know your child? When do you even have time for your child? So the Kotzker Rebbe says in Yiddish, Ich weiß, die Machshavas, was ich hab hereingebracht, dem Kind in dem Welt. I know the thoughts I had during the time of conception of this child into this world. What does this mean? That what God is telling Moshe is, the proof is in the pudding. When these women were intimate with their husbands, their husbands and them, their thoughts at that time of intimacy were holy thoughts to bring children into this crazy world because God said so, because of our faith in God. How do you see the results? You see the children. How do you know if when this child was conceived, it was conceived with proper, pure thoughts? Because look at the child, what the child grows up to be. How do you know what a child is? By when you see them growing up, but it is the result of the thoughts of the parents during conception. Kabbalah explains. So God is saying to Moshe, you see how these mirrors are part of a very holy act because you see the end result, the children, the great children who left Egypt with their parents, devoted to the parents. None of the children said, you know, mom and dad, you want to immigrate to the land of Israel? Go live your pipe dream. We're staying here. We're going to be Egyptians. The children, the mothers, the fathers, the sons, all left Egypt together, all stood at Sinai and said, Nasa v'nishma. It wasn't the parents who said Nasa, it was the children who said, we will do, and we will accept the Torah. So God is saying to Moshe, look at the end result of their mirrors, of their intimacy. That's how you know it's a great thing. So God clarified to Moshe a very deep thing here. Moshe looked at a mirror, a mirror. Who needs a mirror? God said, no, this mirror is a reflection of what went on. The faith of the women, the holy thoughts during intimacy, during conception. And that's how they were able to bring forth a generation of children who left Egypt and then entered into the land of Israel. It's a direct result of their acts. So the Kabbalah explains how what we think during intimacy, our thoughts, our pure thoughts, that we think of the husband and the husband thinks of the wife and that you're thinking of somebody else or something else, is part of the beauty of when you conceive a child. Your thoughts have only to be on your spouse and your spouse on you. And that's why also when the Kohen Gadol went into the holies of holies on Yom Kippur, remember, the high priest would go into the holies of holies in the tabernacle and then in the Beit HaMikdash. And if the Kohen Gadol was thinking of something or somebody else while he went in there to pray for the Jews, he would die on the spot, God forbid. So that intimate moment with God, he couldn't think about his mortgage, his son getting into the right college. Did I forget to do this? Did I forget to do this? Did I forget to shut off the furnace before I left the house? Or the fire? His whole mindset had to be on the service to God, praying for the Jewish people. And that was the intimate moment between God and the Jewish people when the Kohen Gadol went. And that's symbolic of when the husband and wife are intimate. You can't be thinking of another guy. You can't be thinking of another lady when you're with your spouse. You have to focus on each other. And when you conceive a child, and it's the intimacy with holiness and trueness and faithfulness and purity, the end result is children who leave Egypt with you and follow the path of Torah and mitzvahs. This is what the Kotzker Rebbe said. Yeah, I may not know my child every single day. I may not take him to kindergarten and speak to the teacher, how's my son's drawings today? Or how is he doing with the Aleph Bet? But I know what I did when I conceived him. I know my thoughts. And my thoughts were pure. And my thoughts were good. So I know that's how I know my child. And to end off this point, and this Torah portion this is the power of the feminine, of the women. This is what God is telling Moshe. The power of the feminine energy. You know what's our real power? That we take the most mundane, materialistic, seemingly maybe not the most, what the world looks at like pure. And we imbue everything with holiness, purity, and spirituality. The Christians say, intimacy is a necessary evil. In Judaism, it's the holiest act when done with, of course, your husband, following the laws of family purity, Jewish marriage, and so on. It's the holiest act. So women, you're doing laundry, you're cooking, you're baking, you're running errands, you're working, whatever you're doing, if your life is imbued with Torah and mitzvahs, whatever you do is imbued with holiness. You might say, what's the big thing? I did laundry. I went shopping. I sold some stocks. I bought some stocks. I'm a fashion designer. I designed a few dresses. Everything you now do in your life is part of that holiness because your life is imbued with it. So everything you touch has that magic because you're doing it for a higher purpose. So this is what God tells Moshe, the women have the power to imbue everything with holiness, even their mirrors. So when you look at something superficially, oh, a mirror, vanity, into the garbage. God is saying, no, 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 no. The women, the feminine energy, imbue everything with holiness. Now, end off with a story. First night of the Seder, the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, would leave 770 and walk home, but he would take a detour to quickly look at the different yeshivas where the boys and the girls would board. So he would go into the boys' yeshiva and look at the Seder they were setting up, and he went into the girls' school, a girls' school called Machon Chana, and it was a school, college level, for young ladies who wanted to study Judaism, weren't born with the education, wanted to get this education. And he walks in and they give him a tour, and he says to the dean, a woman there, Mrs. Gansberg, the Rebbe says, where are the mirrors? I don't see any mirrors here for the girls. And they went out and they bought mirrors. Because what did they assume? Why do the girls need mirrors? They're here for spirituality. They're here to learn Torah. What do they need mirrors for? The Rebbe said, where are the mirrors? Where are those mirrors? Indicating, if you feel beautiful about yourself, you're going to feel beautiful about life. There's nothing wrong with, as a matter of fact, the Torah wants men and women to dress beautifully, look beautifully, feel beautiful about yourself. And here we see, because everything we do is imbued with holiness. So, to just reiterate how the Torah portion and the Torah and Jewish life is so centered upon the feminine energy, the feminine power, our leadership, our ability to transform everything and anything into spirituality and holiness. It's a very wonderful, wonderful thought to leave with, that you could really conquer the universe. That's what it really is. The women led then. They were first to get the Torah, first to give their jewelry for the Mishkan, first in really everything. And next time we'll also learn about how they did not participate in the sin of the Meraglim, of the spies, once again. So you see it throughout Torah history. And when we study the scroll of Esther in the next few weeks, we will see the leadership of Queen Esther. So again, maybe sometimes subtly, you see again the energy, the neshama, and the wonderful, wonderful soul of the Jewish woman. And really what it teaches us is how much we could do and accomplish, and how effective we are in our lives, we could be in our lives. So I want to wish everybody a good Shabbos, and